And in his many travels, he has gotten a lot of beautiful photographs of ancient sites, and then he describes all about them, translates them and everything. This one, for example, is Mayan, Toltec, Aztec visions of our soul life. And he'll probably be mentioning some of these this morning and later on in the morning. And also the ancient Egyptians' visions of our soul life, a full color journey through real temples and ancient texts. Beautifully done, beautifully explained. And so we'll give him just a minute to kind of catch his breath. He's going to be talking to us this morning about Edgar Cayce on Aliens Among Us, our place in the universe of worlds. So that should be pretty exciting. And if you get a chance, have any of you taken one of these tours with John? Okay, you're going to be our tour ambassadors, and you tell everybody else about it. One of my dreams is to get to go on that Egyptian tour to see the pyramids and have John lecture on all the sacred sites. So we'll hold on to our dreams until they become reality. And John, if you've had a chance to catch your breath, welcome back. Good to see you.
Okay. So, I wasn't late. I was told 9:30. But apparently, somehow we start these things a year ago, and then somebody forgets they mentioned to John it was, you can't hear me? What happened? It came off when I pulled my mask off. Ah. All right. So a year ago, I wrote it in my schedule as 9:30, and then somewhere throughout the year, the schedule was changed. But that's not going to affect us. There are two segments to today. The first segment will actually deal with, the first part will deal with Edgar Cayce, and then the second part of the first segment will deal with all the modern evidence of UFOs, foreign objects of some unexplainable nature and ability. And then the third segment this morning, the third part of the first segment, will be Sitchin and some of those ideas. And then we'll take a break and go into the mini and have refreshments. Then we come back. I'm going to show you an enormous part of the story that no one thinks about except Cayce told us to think about it. And I'll show you all the evidence that the ancient beings, earth-oriented beings, were us. And I will show you, very probably your soul was involved in some of this. This is our sweet planet, and you might think it's the center of the universe. It isn't. It's on the outskirts of the Milky Way. It's in a relatively small solar system, so there's a lot more, an enormous amount to the galaxy of the Milky Way than our little zone or solar system, which means star system. Our star, the sun, and the planets operating around it. So here we go with Mr. Cayce. I will read for those of you who have trouble seeing it. The entity was among the priestesses of the Mayan experience. You know the Mayan, Toltecs, Aztecs? Okay. It was just before that period when those as from the east had come. The east in that period was Atlantis, which was 210,000 years BC. Okay? Lemuria was in the west, in the Pacific, and it was 1,000,000 years old. Now you say, well, wait a minute, our archaeologists can't find any human remains older than 400,000 years. Well, they were not fully physical like you and I. Lemurians were a high state. According to Cayce, they were the highest state of activity on the earth for millions of years, but they were not hard flesh bodies like we travel around in today. They were much more spirits and thought forms, he said, and they could project themselves as light beings. So could the early Atlanteans, but that faded and they became more and more physical. But he said never as physical as we are today. Okay? So I told you last night, we are down, way down on the chain of descent from heaven into matter. But we're about to make a turn that's going to be dramatic, and everyone, well, Jesus says there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see the truth, when the veil drops. So you don't want to be a part of that. You want to go, oh yeah, I knew this was coming. The East had come. Those were Atlanteans who had migrated to Yucatan Peninsula. And there were the beginnings of the unfoldments of the understanding that there were other portions of the same land, or those that were visiting from other worlds, other planets. Now, a lot of people have written books showing Mayan glyphs and graphics that do seem to depict flight and space and alien beings. Okay, the next reading is, man may become with the people of the universe. That's not even the galaxy. That's the universe. Now he said the great infinite Elohim in Genesis, when that singular universal consciousness in absolute stillness, like the womb of Mother God, absolutely still. When it moved to conceive, it brought forth, let there be light, and Edgar said that light meant consciousness. And it did it in its own image. So all this infinite consciousness created individual consciousnesses within itself and gave them free will. Oh my God, even the angels went, oh, what are we doing? Edgar explained that they live similar to us, but not exactly in the same manner we incarnate on this planet, but similar. And also very different than we do. And that some of our souls, like for example, I was going to finish the sentence, some of our souls have experienced this. For example, a lady from New Jersey came to get a reading from Edgar, and he goes into trance and he says, oh, here's a Uranian. How interesting. No, I'm from New Jersey. No, your soul first touched this system in Uranus, and there you developed all the factors and features that astrology talks about related to Uranus. Another time he was in the trance state and they started to give a reading, and he said, oh, a fourth dimensional mind, how refreshing. That's what you want him to say to you. You want him to go, oh, I'm so fatigued with three-dimensional questions from three-dimensional minds. A fourth dimensional mind. How wonderful it is. Ruler of any of the various spheres, planets, spherical, structures in the universe, through which the soul passes in its experiences. So your soul has passed through lots of experiences beyond this incarnation. Quote, the dwellers upon the moon. We already been there, you guys. Do you know he said there are records in caves on the moons and we'll rediscover them and it will shock us. Now, my question is, are they going to reveal them to us or keep it secret? Oh, let's not upset them all. Let's not confuse the thinking. Let them hold to the earth thoughts we've been teaching them. I hope not. Also, Edgar said you will find water on the moon. They've already found that, water on the moon. So they know they can build satellite stations on the moon. Preceded the abilities for matter. Okay, so you weren't fully in matter, but you were colonizing the moon, okay? You were living in a colony on the moon. Expressed in a form that is known as matter in the earth. Now that's a parenthetical statement. Gladys told me that when she was recording his reading, he would turn and make an aside to her, and she would put it in parentheses. When she made a comment like, oh, I don't know how that's spelled, she'd put it in brackets. So when you read the reading, you know it's Gladys talking if it's in brackets. If it's a parentheses, it's Edgar giving an aside, and that's an aside. Expressed in a form that is known as matter in the earth. So it was before the matter form we're using today. And this entity, it was a little girl, by the way, was among those that so dwelt on the colonies in the moon, and is influenced by two sojourns. Two incarnations. We use incarnation, but in Latin that means in the flesh, and I don't mean that. But two sojourns on the moon colony. Now, her mother writes a wonderful report about this. Look at this. Her mother told her that when she was 3 or 4 years old, she used to gather the neighborhood children and tell them stories, especially about the moon and what she did when she used to live there. Your little childhood, that's why when I'm around little children, I allow any story they're telling me to come out, because there's something to it. In some part of it, there's the essence of truth to what their little minds closer to the spirit recall or express to you. One day, her father gave her a spanking for telling lies. That was the old days, you know. These days, we don't do that so much. Look at Edgar's dad. He tested Edgar on the spelling test for the next day, and he didn't know any of the words and how to spell them. So Edgar said, Dad, if you'll let me sleep on that book for 15 minutes, I'll be able to do this spelling. Now, I had 3 children. I don't know what I would have done if they said that to me, you know. But his dad said, you got 15 minutes. When he came back, Edgar said, Dad, I don't just know the test tomorrow. I know every word in that book and what page it's on. Test me on any of it. It's a photographic picture of it. All he had actually done was put it behind his head and reclined on the couch. And he had the ability to consume the content of that book. But he gave her a spanking for lying, so she never talked about the moon again. Isn't that sad? Mother regretted not having had the life reading from Mr. Cayce earlier, so as not to have punished her for this story about living on the moon. Was nearly 2 years old before she learned to sleep at night, liked to sleep during the day and keep awake at night. And in the reading, Edgar said, when the moon was full, she was full of life. And when the moon was gone, you couldn't see a moonless night, she was in sort of a mood. So what do you think of this? Uh-huh. Have any of you noticed that you have a little fascination with the moon? Yep, you may have known this gal. Here's Edgar again. The entity was in Atlantis when there was the exodus from Atlantis owing to the destructive forces. So Atlantis was a huge continent. Then it broke into 5 islands because of bad vibrations and Mother Nature reacting. Then 2 of those sunk and there were only 3 islands left. And so everybody said, we got to migrate. The same thing was happening in the Pacific with the Lemurians, Mu. And they were migrating to Asia and South America and North America. In fact, the Hopi Indians tell that they started to hear through the soft spot in their head the voice of a heavenly guidance to migrate to a new land, and they would find hills to live on, and those are the 3 mesas of the Hopi. They live on the top of 3 mesas, and I've actually taken tours there, and I was with the Hopi, and I was sitting there with all the Hopi men thinking, wow, man, this is cool, and then I said, boy, so you guys lead the family, and their heads kind of, I went, well, who's the leader? And they said, well, in our culture, the women are the... I said, what? Yeah, I said, well, I want to talk to them. So they took me to the chief. And she was wonderful, and she said, yes, in our culture, the women own all the property, and we make the big decisions and all of this and all. And I said, well, do you marry? And she said, oh, yeah, we can pick any man we want. And I said, well, do you have divorce? She said, it's easy in our culture. You just take all his stuff and put it outside the front door, and he knows it's over. Well, I'll tell you a sad part of this, and it fits with Leo Tolstoy commercialism. The sad part is when I was sitting with the Hopi and chatting with them, I said, well, what are you most excited about these days? And they said, oh, they're building a Walmart at the base of Mesa 2. I thought, yep, these boys have been bought into the commercial materialistic culture. Thrilled to have blue jeans. Okay, destructive forces. The entity was also among those in the Yucatan, the Pyrenees, and Egypt, using airships. Now, this will be the second part of the morning, that I will give you all the details from Edgar and historical records of us flying in ancient times. And you recall in the Bible, Ezekiel said that the flying, I don't want to call it machine, but the flying vehicle or vessel was moved by your spirit. If your spirit ascended, the vessel ascended. If you wanted to go left and you felt that, your spirit moved it left and right. And you read about it yourselves in the Bible. The entity, here's another reading, a different one. The entity was in Atlantis during those periods just before the breaking up of Poseidia. That's the last island to go down. So this guy is really close to the end of Atlantis. The entity controlled the flying boats that moved through air or water. These were the means by which the entity carried many to Iberia, Portugal, Spain, and the Pyrenees Mountains. The reason I put them in there is they're very important in the Cayce ancient story of escaping to the Pyrenees Mountains. And you'll also see Mount Ararat in his story, and you know about Noah and Mount Ararat, no, I assume. Later on to Egypt, when there had been the determining that the records should be kept there. Okay, the Atlanteans knew their culture was over. The vibes had gotten too out of harmony with nature, Mother Nature, and her forces were reacting violently. And so they created 32 stone tablets in 3 sets and hid them on the planet Earth in 3 locations. One of them was in Egypt off the right front paw of the Sphinx. So when we find those, we will have the story of prehistoric times. The descent out of heaven into Lemuria, into Atlantis, and then the loss of that through. Now, you will see this in the Bible. The first creation is Genesis chapter 1 through 5 and partial 6. And then a second creation occurs because God takes and cleanses the earth with a great flood, and we have to start over. Not everybody is wiped away, because Noah and others around the planet were allowed to breed the second creation, which changes greatly. I'm going to show you some of this as we go along, so hang in there. A fun part of this guy, he was a pilot in this life. See how it carried over? I'm sure he found the instrument very crude. Here's one of our biggest problems. Mr. 877 asked if he and his friend Edgar Cayce had a relationship in this past life. He was getting a past life reading. The sleeping Cayce explained that the period they were discussing was not a past life. It was 500,000 years before even the law of one entered the earth, the world. An aspect of you was alive 500,000 years before the 4.8 billion-year-old planet existed. Do you remember that? Neither did 877. So here's the problem. There is a part of us, Edgar said it's very hard to explain this three-dimensionally, but there was never a beginning, because you were always an aspect of the infinite universal consciousness. You didn't just come out of anywhere. You were like a cell in the body of the infinite, like a mind, a thought in the great mind. And when God gave animation to that thought and free will, you expressed yourself, but you were already in existence. It's hard. So he says, no beginning, there is no end. You are infinite, eternal, immortal beings. It's real hard to think about that. But if you find time to idle on it, it will create more contentment deep inside you when life is going kind of screwy. You'll laugh at it. You say, yeah, my mother used to say this. She was very mystical, spiritual. In fact, she scared me often. I was the oldest child. She was a little Irish Catholic urban girl from a city up north. And she would take me, because I was the oldest, and my dad would go to sea for 6 months. He was a naval officer. And she would take me to these Thursday night novenas. Now, this was back when the Catholic Church was still very mystical. So I'm a little 9-year-old kid, and I'm sitting with mostly all women or a few old men in a dark church with candlelight and incense halfway down the ceiling, a cloud. All the women have their heads covered, and they're all in a very devout situation, and my mother is starting to say words and prayers in her own voice and quiet to herself mostly. And I'm thinking, oh my God, something's going to happen any minute. Then the darn priest would ring bells and take the chain and start shaking it like this. And I go, oh, I can't believe this. And I would snuggle up next to her, but it wouldn't distract her, which really bothered me. It means Mom's somewhere else. And then one time we were stationed in Newfoundland, and we were driving off base, and we had an ice storm, and we were sliding in the car. And my brothers and I, they had bench seats and no seat belts back in those days. We're on the bench seat in the back with our heads like this, and Mom was driving in the driver's seat. And suddenly we saw cars sliding and some going down the hill into the fjord. We knew they were in terrible trouble, and others were going up the mountain on the side. Suddenly we lost control of the car, and Mom starts calling out to heaven. And all of these beings and angels, and my brothers and I are like this, and Suddenly the car is going off and we're going to go down that hill, and then it turns and goes up the hill. She yells, "Get out of the car and run up the hill." My 3 brothers and I jump out, we run up the hill, and we're looking, and the car slides back and goes down into the fjord. And my brother Gary turns to me and says, "Man, we got to stay close to Mom." She's got friends in high places. So my dad was an Iowa farm boy who joined the Navy before World War II at 19 years old with a signature from his mom. And he believed God was nature. So my brothers and I grew up with a father who would take us into the woods and say, "Now just sit down, sit still, and life will come back." And we would sit there dead silent because we had made the noise walking in, and suddenly everything would come alive, and he would say, "See, that is the Spirit of God. Life is everywhere in the woods." And see all the, and we would, that's why we had this sort of unique upbringing with these 2 guys. Okay, now here's his big reading. I know it's long, but it's worth reading and understanding. We are actually star travelers, our souls. Here it is, quote, "As an entity passes from this present time or this solar system, this sun, these forces, it passes through various spheres on and on through the eons of time and space, leading first into that central force known as Arcturus. Long before the Stargate movie and TV series, Edgar Cayce named stargates, and the one he named for this solar system is Arcturus. In fact, a lady came to get a reading from him, and he said, "Oh, here's a soul who was at Arcturus last night." And she, no, I was in my bed. And said, "Your soul was at Arcturus, and you were soaking up feelings and insights that inspired you when you woke." Arcturus is the Stargate in and out of here. Now, these are his words. "Nearer the Pleiades," you know about the 7 sisters. They're famous in legend, the 7 stars of the Pleiades. And I've written a lot about them, and also, but I can't go into it this morning. Eventually, an entity passes into the inner forces, the inner sense. Then they may again, after a period of nearly 10,000 years, which is nothing to a soul, because Edgar says when you get beyond here, there's no time and space. It's all one time, one space. Enter into the earth to make manifest those forces. So you come in here to actually imbue yourself with what you experienced in the other dimensions, so it becomes truly a part of yourself. And that's why a lot of Cayce's past life readings begin with astrological comments about your soul. Do most of you know he did that? No? Oh, wow. So you really don't know a lot about Mr. Cayce, is that true? You're here kind of on surprise. Well, let me take just a few minutes. As a young boy, he showed powers that were unusual, like knowing the spelling book by sleeping on it, and that's how he got nicknamed the Sleeping Prophet. Basically, he would loosen his collar, his shoelaces, he would lie down, and he would put his hands over his third eye forehead until he saw a white light. Once he saw it, he would move his hands over his solar plexus. Now, he's reclined. He would put his hands over his solar plexus, and he would start to go into deep breathing and REM, rapid eye movement, which means he's falling asleep, right? But his wife, mostly his wife, but his son also did it too, would catch him. She would watch him close, and when he started to go into deep breathing and REM, she would say, "You will have before you the inquiring mind of Mary Smith from New Jersey." And the white light would move, and he would move with it. And he went through dimensions. Apparently, right around this world is a very dense dimension, and then beyond it are lighter and lighter dimensions. And eventually, he got to a place that he understood to be the Hall of Records. And as he came to it, the keeper of the records for Mary Smith in New Jersey would come out with the book of life about her. And he would show it to Edgar and tell him what he could read and what he could not read. That's why they got nicknamed readings. And if he flipped the pages this way, he was looking into her future, and he could actually see her future. If he flipped the pages this way, he was looking into her past, and he could see her ancient past. And Gladys would take all of this down and stenographically. You can actually go up to the library or the ECF, Edgar Cayce Foundation, and see her recording of readings. You can actually, I believe the library has a voice recording of his voice giving a reading. The thing that's going to shock you is he has a heavy Southern accent. Heavy. Have any of you listened to it? I was stunned. Were you? A little surprised? Yeah, I was too. Because here, all through my childhood and young adulthood, I thought of his voice as sort of this, dramatic actor voice. And here it was, let's see, I can't even do it like he does it. Some mornings I can, but not this morning. Okay. For nearly 10,000 years, and then you enter to make manifest that what you gained in the passage. In entering, the entity has to take on the forms that may be known in the dimensions of that plane which it occupies. There being not only the three dimensions of the earth, that's where you and I have depth and heights and breadth, but there may be 7, as in Mercury, the realm of the mind. Not the planet, you guys. Edgar didn't say you were on the planet. The planet is a 3-dimensional representation of a 4th and 5th dimensional realm of mental development and training, where the soul goes. Or 4 dimensions in Venus, the heart, arts, creativity. Or 5 in Jupiter. Jupiter, he said, are the masses, not individual focus, but focus on the whole of the community, a bigger focus. High ideals, high purposes. There may be only one, as in Mars. And you remember General Patton? He believed in reincarnation, and he remembered his past lives as a general. And he thought he incarnated straight out of Mars with one mission: win the battle. And I had friends who actually served in Patton's army. I think it was the 7th Army. And they said, what was it? The 3rd Army. And it was tough to be under him. He drove them like very few generals did. But he had this fervor, and one dimension as in Mars. And remember, as soon as we were victorious in World War II, he died. He left. There was nothing more here. He wasn't going to be a desk jockey. That was not what he was. There may be many more as those in Neptune, or there may become even as nil until purified in Saturn's fires. Now, a lady that I knew, I grew up with here, she was much older than me, a wonderful vibration, a wonderful lady, got a reading from Edgar Cayce in which, in trance, he said, oh, here's one who's been to Saturn often, and God loves one who's willing to start over. Saturn is the purifier. Even in astrology, Saturn's energy is dramatic change. And Edgar reinforced that idea. And so, and you know the Saturn cycles. Well, some of you do. So at 29 years of age is your first Saturn cycle, and usually your life goes nuts. And that's why we all say, oh, 30, oh my God. When I had my young boys and they were in their 20s and all, they thought 30 was ferociously old. and that you lost all of your boyhood and you were nothing but a man. And I said, kids, I'm 50. Yeah. Sorry about that, Dad. Now my oldest one is 40-something, and he's going, whoa, I know what you were talking about. Now, usually we think of, this is from Revelation chapter 12, a great chapter about the divine female giving birth to your spiritual self. This is an element of you, no matter what gender you are. You conceive in the womb of your heart and mind your true self, and you must birth it. But it also symbolizes the only way into this world is through the womb. And that was decided by the forces of nature and heaven. However, there is another way, but it's only temporary. You can shift your eternal condition into a material projection. And I'm going to show you the science of this. Edgar Cayce wanted us to understand water and the different conditions of water and reflect on it as different conditions of our being. So we are solid, we are dense, and that's like ice. If we get high, either through the euphoria of loving or having a little baby in our arms, or meeting someone we truly love, or hearing something that gets us excited, we become like liquid. We get more fluid. If you've ever been meditating in a group usually, and someone slams the door, and you feel yourself kind of like they threw a rock into your pond, and you're off balance, you got to hang in there because it will calm down again. But if you stop and get up, you'll be out of whack for hours. But let's say you hang in there. That's your fluid state. You were in the deeper fluid state that is represented by water in its liquid form. And the pebble came in and threw ripples into you, but you stayed and you got steady again. If you keep getting high and higher, you're like steam. You start to get the water to a boil, and you burst into vapor like a gas. And Edgar mentioned this is like the spirit when you're in the spirit. Sometimes when that happens to you in meditation, you feel that you're up above your body and expanded, quite expanded. That's a common report from people who meditate often and regular and can get deep. But there's a fourth state of matter, a fourth dimension to matter, and that's ionized particles of vapor. Suddenly they get charged, supercharged. Now you can experience this by going to the ocean across the street and standing in front of the waves, and as they churn, they will throw off negative ions. And if you inhale them, you will feel high. You will feel, whoa, that's refreshing, because you are touched on the spirit condition, the plasma condition. Okay, let's look at this. Plasma is superheated matter, so hot that the electrons are ripped away from the atoms, forming an ionized gas. It comprises 99% of the universe, lives in that dimension of the visible universe. And the visible universe, the scientists have told us, is only 4% of the total universe. 96% is invisible. Well, how do they know that? They can see the effect of the 96% on the 4%, and they know it's there, just not visible. Plus, the electromagnetic spectrum you and I live in is very narrow, so that our consciousness is focused, but you can branch out and expand that awareness. Plasma is often called the fourth state of matter, along with solid, liquid, and gas. So here's Mr. Cayce. Changed in its vibration. I was raised in the 60s, and one of the great things I recall is we didn't judge. I have to speak as a boy at university, a male. we didn't judge girls by their looks as much as by their vibes. And I remember talking with my buddies, wow, she has great vibes. And sometimes we'd say, oh man, I'm not going near those vibes. She scares me to death. Have you felt her vibes? And we even got the song going, Good Vibrations, which is now a classic. Do you see what we were dealing with? That generation being born after World War II, I'm a baby boomer of 1946. We came in with the idea of vibrations are what a person really radiates. Don't judge by their looks. That'll trick you every time. But by their vibes. And our whole generation, now, we did have some loosey-goosey stuff. I mean, we had free love and flower and a lot of drugs. Thank God I never got into that. But it was around me all the time, especially at university. So we did have our weaknesses. And Hugh Lynn used to joke with me. Hugh Lynn is Edgar Cayce's eldest son, who was the president of A.R.E. all through my youth working here, my young years. He led the organization. And he was a reincarnation from ancient Egypt of the Pharaoh at the time. Edgar was Rata, the high priest. So there was a soul group movement here. And he used to joke with me, just look at you guys. You like to wear your hair long. You like to wear fabric belts instead of leather and soft shoes. He said, you're just a bunch of reincarnated American Indians. That's what you are. And I went, oh, man, and we really like that stuff. And they smoked and a peyote and other sort of things, and it's in our whole group. And I realized, oh my gosh, we're carrying all this. So very interesting. Now, the generation now has about 2 generations before the current generation, I heard them saying to me, well, you know, what goes around comes around. And I thought, oh my God, this whole high school group, we never thought about that in high school. Never. It never occurred to us. And this high school group that I was talking with, what goes around comes around, is karma. It's a brilliant insight into karma. And I thought, they know it automatically. So each generation brings in a higher level of what was there before. Also, if the dark forces are coming in, they bring in a lower and willfully try to dominate the higher, more angelic thinking by the power of their negative thinking. Vibrations. To produce that element or that force, as is termed in man's terminology, as dimensions. So he's saying that when in university, my buddies and I met a certain person, or let's say a teacher, because there were a few teachers that had great rumors about them, and everybody wanted their class. So we would say they had good vibes, but Edgar's saying they had a dimension to their awareness and their consciousness that you were feeling. They were like, he said to that one lady, oh, a 4th dimensional mind, how refreshing. You see, he's connecting dimension of consciousness with vibration. And if you go into the Eastern teachings, raising your vibes expands your consciousness. So the higher you get your body's vibes, the broader your consciousness becomes. So keep that in mind. He's tying all that together. And then he goes on, like we've already done, solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. So the question is, how could you manifest temporarily here without going through a womb? And the answer is, reverse that flow. And I'll give you an example in my life. I was in my early 20s or mid-20s, I think it was, I was the manager of a bluegrass band named Rocky Top. And we were up in Minot, North Dakota, almost off the planet. There's nothing beyond that place, let me tell you. But, you know. And we finished it around 1 in the morning, and I wanted to go home to Virginia Beach. So I jumped in my car 1 something in the morning, and I drove out of North Dakota into South Dakota, and I'm going to come across, let's see, I'm going this way actually. I'm going to come across South Dakota and go down into Nebraska. And it's getting to be 2 in the morning. Well, as I'm going across South Dakota, now this is the Great Plains, flat forever. I can see the horizon all around me, and there's a hitchhiker. And I feel the wheel pulling over, and I'm going, what the heck, what are you doing? And he gets in my car, and I pull out, and I say, he says to me, physical being now, he's physical. He is physical, I assure you. Okay? But he came out from somewhere else. I said, I'm going up to route so-and-so and turn south. Now, there's no GPS. I'm using a paper map. Right. Okay. And he says, don't do that. That's the Indian Reservation, Wounded Knee, and they just killed 2 FBI agents last week. They'll beat you up if you go through their reservation. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that. Where should I turn south? He said, go up to the next route and turn south. I said, okay. So I pass the route into the reservation. I go up, I turn. He wants to get out. He gets out. I look around. There's no one. I mean, it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. There's no one out there. And I look back for him, and I can't find him. Now, I can see to the horizon, and I can't find him. So I get out of the car. He may have fallen down. I look around, I cannot see him, and suddenly all the hair on my body starts to raise up, and I am totally frightened. The silence of the Great Plains at 3 in the morning was terrifyingly loud, and I was terrified to think I had just, as St. Paul, or the disciple Paul wrote, I had just entertained angel unaware. This guy warned me and then left. I got back into my car driving to Nebraska like this. They know what I'm doing. They're watching me. You know, I really was struck by that experience, and I thought, oh my gosh, and they care. They sent somebody to stop me. You know, it had a profound effect on me. So this is what I'm trying to show you, that they can do that, and they have done it. Have any of you in this room felt you might have entertained a higher being unaware that helped you in some way? Yes, amen. Good, good, good. Okay, that's what I'm trying to show you here. Now, since I had the wrong time for the beginning, what is the time for the break? 10:20? Okay, good. We still got plenty of time. Now we're going to go to Genesis 6, which is the beginning of the second creation. I know you're not aware of 2 creations, but it's true, and it's right in the Bible also. But it's also in ancient legends everywhere. The first creation is Genesis 1 through 5 and a little bit of 6. And then we start over. Now, when God speaks, he notices, and here's the Genesis 6. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Now you're talking physical incarnations. This is the 400,000-year-old humanoids that archaeologists have found. You understand? Homo sapien goes back about 40,000 years, but hominids go back about 400,000 years. These are vehicles. They are not you. They're vehicles used by your soul. Anyway, and the daughters were born to them. Now, you got to understand, the yin is the daughter. The female is the yin. The yin is the inner part. You have to go back to Genesis 1, chapter 2, about 18, verse 18. When God casts a deep sleep over the androgynous Adam and pulls out the feminine. And the Hebrew word used to describe her is kava, the life giver. And then Eve, she gets the name Eve because she's the mother of all. Eve means mother of all. Do you see? But that's you. That's the part of you is being separated. So your inner intuitive self is the feminine. It is the most beautiful part of yourself. In Hebrew, male is ish. Female is ish shah. All the shah means with womb. It's the he with womb. Do you get it? They're both the same, but one gets the womb. It's separated. Do you see? Now, fortunately, Carl Jung comes along and says, oh, don't worry about it, John. You got a womb within you. If you get in touch with your feminine within you, you have the Kava, the life giver. She's within you. So the feminine is very much the more beautiful expression physically because she represents that inner divine creative self, life-giving self. And all of us have it no matter what your gender is. Okay. When daughters were physically manifest, now you see it physical, were born to them, the sons of God, remember last night I told you even women are sons of God at the higher level, okay? Saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. And here is Mr. French's sculpture of the daughters of humanity, of physicality, being lusted after or longed for by the sons of God. And in this situation, it's the first time we actually saw the manifestation of the divine feminine self. And it was the more beautiful than the male manifestation. And it created tremendous attraction. And men still are trying to deal with it, you know. I call it the Solomon syndrome because King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. You know, I had one. I cannot imagine servicing 700 and still wanting 300 concubines. Somehow nature has put into men some really disruptive hormones, and when they kick in, look out. And females have been having to deal with this for thousands of years. And here you see it in Genesis 6. This is a Bible quote, you guys. I'm not giving you a Cayce metaphysical reading, but he confirms that as well. Okay, here we go. There was a time when the spirits of the children of God that were in higher vibrational bodies, closer to what Cayce called thought forms. So imagine your mind imagining you right over here, and that would have a shape. I'll help you because he said if you read Tertium Organum by Ouspensky, you would understand dimensions better. And I'm going to help you not read that tome. Ouspensky said, I want you to imagine a one-dimensional person who lives on one dimension. That one-dimensional consciousness cannot perceive the second dimension because it doesn't exist on the first. He has to, or she has to have an altered experience, an altered awareness, a breakthrough, and bang, suddenly perceives the second dimension. You see what I'm doing? Where's the third dimension? Totally perpendicular to anything in the first or second dimension. You can't find it in these two dimensions. You can't find it. You have to have a breakthrough. And then bang, there's the third dimension of breadth. Now imagine with your minds, I have a cube in my hand. And use your minds to see that cube and form that cube. Are you doing it? Yeah, me too. That is a thought form. It is a vessel of existence in fourth dimension. We are beyond the third now. I'm going to pull my hands away, but keep the cube there. So he's saying that we could get involved in this world in a thought form way and not be touched physically by the world. Do you see? Now, sometimes we experience passed on loved ones like grandmother as a whisper over our shoulder, but she's not in the mirror. Do you understand? She's in the fourth dimensional, and she loves you so much she's telling you something. Or you feel her presence. You don't hear anything, you just feel her. Have any of you had that experience of a loved one who's passed on? Yeah. Okay, good. And if you ever want to perceive the spirit, how many of you have had a pet that you knew very well and you saw the pet dead? What left that body? I had a little cat who I knew for years and was an adorable little pet. And one day she went to the air vent in the back bathroom and laid down on it. And the next morning when I got up, she was dead. And I looked at her, and that was her body. And this is when I first perceived spirit. I knew that ran around my house, tore up my furniture, loved the backyard, chased the squirrels, that is gone. But the vehicle she left for me, she's gone. Have you ever had a dead human that you knew very well in your presence, and you look and there's no more animation? The spirit left. Her spirit was what you were actually doing. From that moment on in my training with Edgar Cayce, I looked at people as the animated life essence in them rather than their physical bodies. And it helped me a lot. It helped me to pick up on spirit. But that's a flashback to the 60s when we picked up on vibrations. I was looking at their vibes. Here I'm looking at their animated essence, that force that animates them. Not so much their body, because if they die, their body will be there unanimated, no life force. Well, that was who they truly were, and that's left into the spirit. It helps you really get a grasp. And remember last night I told you the first 10 minutes after death, you're going to be surprised. Now, Edgar said in the 30s that in the 70s we were going to have a new perspective on death. And what happened? The medical profession of all professions became so sophisticated you could die on them and they could bring you back to life. Die now. I want you to picture they've got your body on the table and there's no animation, no breath, no blood flowing, no electrical patterns. And all of you know what this means if I yell out one word: clear. We're going to reanimate this person and pump that heart and get them. The problem was in the recovery room. The doctor would go in and say, man, we had a close one with you. You were really dead there for a while. Yeah, I was shocked when you did this and the nurse did that. And the doctors would, what? Yeah, I was in the room. I saw my body laying there, and I saw you pounding on my heart. I thought it was terrible the way you bruised me. Well, these doctors, now you go on Amazon, you will find 30-some books on near-death experience, stories and legends and all. We are spirits using these vessels, but we come to believe we are the vessel that has a spirit attitude or perspective. That's not it. We are the spirit using these vessels to animate in this world. And if you can start to feel your spirit self, you'll be surprised. You'll actually rejuvenate your body a little bit. When I started doing this, I actually noticed, man, I'm feeling more vitality. Do you see? Because now I've enlivened the spirit of my true nature inside this vehicle, this vessel, and it's responding. Keep all of that in mind. That's what we're being shown here. They were mingling with those of humanity who were in lower earthy bodies. Mingling, gentle word. Those in the thought form bodies were able to conceive new bodies within themselves. So see, in the spirit body, remember when they came to Jesus and said, in Jewish law, if she dies, she belongs, now if her husband dies, she belongs to her brother as a wife to him. And if he dies, she belongs to the other brother. What happens in heaven? Who is she the wife to? And he said, in heaven there's neither marrying nor giving in marriage. Why? Because you're whole. You don't seek a gender counterpart to comfort you. In this world where yin and yang are separated, where the world of duality, you feel lonely unless you have companionship of the opposite gender, or at least the spirit of the opposite gender, because as Edgar explained, homosexuality and lesbian energy in ways that had a lot to do with yin and yang energy. But I don't want to get into that. So, when you leave, you actually have the wholeness of your soul, which has both yin and yang in it. And that's why Carl Jung said, John, if you want to have full consciousness, you got to get in touch with the inner part of you. And same to ladies. You get the understanding there? Okay. Bodies were, and were able to conceive new bodies within themselves. So the great spirit beings could actually manifest a new body. If one of your soul group wanted to incarnate, you could, if you were already here, you had an androgynous body. You know, plants in the plant kingdom are androgynous. They have both. Okay? Well, in ancient Atlantis and Lemuria, you had both. So you could actually make a vehicle. Now, to make a physical vehicle, that was in Atlantis, not so much in Lemuria. You could actually conceive in your androgynous body, hermaphroditic body, a baby body, physical baby body, and birth it, and one of your soul group could use it. And that's how they populated in the sacred groups. They didn't go looking for outer beings unless they were really off track, but they could do it within themselves. And Edgar explains the first 100,000 years of Atlantis, that's what was going on. Then the next 100,000 shifted into what we know today to be copulation and procreation. Okay, because of their natural androgyny, but those in the flesh body were now physically copulating to procreate. I did all that. Higher vibe bodies, sensuality and appealing, experiencing the sensual pleasures. And remember, the Bible uses a funny word to describe marrying and experience a woman. And then he knew his wife. They use that word knew. And that has a lot to do with vibrations and spirit, not so much physicality back in the old days. The Nephilim, did you know they are in the Bible in chapter 6? They are the giant and magical babies of a physical female with a celestial male, son of God, with a physical female. Their child had super size and super energy. So the Bible reports this. Now, where's the Inca? Okay, the Inca report that they saw Nephilim and they only came up to their kneecaps. Now, this was toward the end of the Nephilim. They were dying out because the Creator decided to start over. But the Bible reports the Nephilim, and where is it? Here it is. There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch. We were in our sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Now, look in the book of Numbers in the Bible, and you'll see this. So this isn't for airy-fairy. This is Scripture, Holy Scripture. Oh, my gosh, quote the Bible. Here we go. Now, I'm saying that by the time the Inca saw them, they were declining, and that's why they were more like giant beings, and the Inca came up to their kneecaps. But here, the sons of Enoch said they were like grasshoppers. They were so gigantic. So here we go with fourth dimensional ships. This is a photo from a naval aviation camera, and they have no idea what to make of it. No idea. Now, crop circles have become mostly a hoax, most all of them. But there was a crop circle in the 1960s that started all of this called the Tully Nest in Australia, and it was no hoax. They actually saw the saucer spinning clockwise lift off of the reeds in a lagoon. A lagoon is full of water. And it had crushed the weeds into the water, and as it lifted off and the farmer saw it, it was spinning clockwise, and so were the reeds when it left. And but these two guys created hoax crop circles using a board and string and their imagination and all, and that brought in doubt about everything. And most of the crop circles are bogus. And now they're even saying, oh, yes, I made it with my board and rope, but I was guided by the aliens. It's dead. You're just, no one knows what to believe. But here is the Tully Nest. Here's the farmer who first saw it here in Queensland, Australia. And I toured Australia for A.R.E., fantastic country to tour. And the lagoon, let me see, do I have a picture? Okay, yes, here it is. There's Tully. Here's the lagoon area. So you can see the reeds back then, when there were reeds, they were in the water. And strangely enough, let me see if I can go. The report in the newspaper said the scientists found that the clock circle reeds had no moisture in them. They had been totally dried out, and yet they were sitting on top of a lagoon. So somehow the saucer's spinning or energy sucked all the moisture out of them or changed them. So let's go back here. In 1966, 28-year-old banana farmer in Tully, Queensland, Australia, named George Pedley, saw a blue-gray disc around 9 meters or 29 feet across, kind of a small vessel, rise out of a nearby lagoon and fly off at great speed. My body was frigid with fright. And he goes on to describe puffs of blue vapor. Now, British English spells vapor differently than American English, for those of you who are wondering why it's misspelled. It's not. A whirlpool devoid of all plant life. Okay. Dead reeds began floating to the surface, forming a nest. Reeds were fused together, and heat of the engine or of the centripetal force of the spinning swirl for some time in a clockwise direction. Now here's what's interesting. He and his neighbor farmer, Priestess, for days had been dreaming, or weeks, had been dreaming about UFOs. And then suddenly they find this. So their subconscious was becoming aware. Your subconscious can become aware of things way beyond your outer mind's knowledge. And this is a NASA satellite photo. Nobody knows what to think of it. It's just stunning. What the heck? And then here is a naval aviator's photo out of the front of his cockpit. Here's some more of these. These are photos from our U.S. Naval Air pilots off the coast of Virginia Beach. So Congress got so upset, they spend our tax money willy-nilly, $2.3 trillion for research in this because they're scared they could be Chinese aircraft that we don't know about. So 60 Minutes does a wonderful piece, and this is Bill Whitaker, one of the great reporters for 60 Minutes. Here's the pilots he interviews. Isn't that a beautiful photo? They're off. This is Oceana Naval Air Station, the largest jet base in the world. And flying off, let me see, I think I have a map. Okay, there is Bill Whitaker and the pilot, Ryan, over here, looking at his video of recording this vessel he's chasing. There's the zone. This is Oceana Naval Base right about here. This is the zone where every time the pilots fly out there, for 2 years, every day there were alien aircraft. Every day. Now that caused the Defense Department to worry that some country had sophisticated technology that we didn't know about, and they were watching us. They were watching one of our biggest bases, and the largest, one of the largest naval ship bases is here in Norfolk. The other's in San Diego, or maybe Long Beach. All right, here he is. There's the object. They have different ways of picturing the object. They can use different technology. And here again is another shot, and that sure looks to me like a physical vehicle of some sort. But here's the problem. First, let me show you this. No human can withstand more than 9 Gs, 9 powers of gravity against them. Even for only a few seconds, when undergoing an acceleration of 9 Gs, your body feels 9 times heavier than usual. The blood rushes to your feet because of the weight of blood, and the heart can't pump hard enough to push the heavier blood to your brain, so you lose consciousness. The vessels they were tracking were doing 600 to 700 Gs. 9 Gs will put a human being unconscious, so this is not Chinese or Russian technology, unless they really have had a breakthrough that is impossible. 13,000 miles an hour. Evade radar. Fly through air, water, and space. NASA actually has a video, and it's online, of outside the satellite. You see the Earth, you see the Earth's atmosphere, and you see space, and a light object, a ball of light, comes out real slowly, and once it hits space, it shoots off. That's a NASA satellite recording of motion that can actually fly straight into space at enormous speeds. No signs of propulsion. On those objects I showed you, you didn't see anything shooting out the rear end. No aeronautics, and it defies gravity. Gravity doesn't affect them, but I want to tell you, in the 4th dimension, gravity is not a law. In the 3rd dimension, gravity is a law. But if you have a 4th dimensional vehicle, it's not subject to gravity. Okay, here's Lieutenant Ryan Graves, and he is explaining to Bill Whitaker on 60 Minutes, and I just want you to see that. I am worried, frankly, Graves said in the 60 Minutes interview. You know, if these were tactical jets from some other country that were hanging out up there off of our eastern coast, it would be a massive issue. But because it looks slightly different, we're not willing to actually look at the problem in the face. We're happy to just ignore the fact that these are out there watching us every day. Now, this guy's been through psych exams, physical exams. I mean, he's retired now from naval aviation. But I mean, really, there is something going on. Now, here is the director of the UFO studies, and he says, we don't know whether the UFO problem is an intelligence one. In other words, our own government could have secret operations with alien craft out of Area 51, and they aren't even telling the rest of the government. Do you understand? So our intelligence is, or maybe China does have something. Due to foreign adversaries, maybe they are due to foreign adversaries, but we do know from its long history that it is absolutely a scientific problem that deserves serious attention. And here you see the universe is vast, and the assumption is the distance barrier would be impossible. And you and I know that the closest thing to us is light years away. How would we ever get there before we became an old person? Well, Einstein gave the answer to it. Wormholes. Energy channels in space that move you almost instantaneously from one location to another. And that might explain Edgar telling the Mayan priestess that she was being visited from other planets, other worlds, because they were using such a technology to do it. Okay, now 1026, so you said 1020, right? Okay, so let's stop here. I'll come back to this, and we'll go take our refreshment break, bathroom break. And remember, in the mini is where the refreshments are. That's the mini auditorium right over there. Yes, the past lives of Jesus. He does that talk. All right, here's one thing we need to be aware of. There is a belief that the UFOs, or UAPs as the military likes to call them, unidentified aerial phenomena, but UFO, unidentified flying objects. There is a technology called laser plasma projected technology, and it's in Star Wars. When Princess Leia is projected with her animated message, that is a laser plasma projection. A hologram in plasmic form, yes. And so, what the implication is technologically is that a foreign country could possibly have this technology and nothing more, and what you're seeing is them projecting stuff to harass us. That's one of the theories. I just need you to know I knew that, so when you go read somebody and don't think I'm an idiot, I know this possibility. This is a possibility. Now, here is a report that is really profound and was recently unclassified. Unidentified aerial phenomena out of the UK, United Kingdom. Again, it's plasma formations. And the report, the Kanajan reports that scientists in the former Soviet Union, and they had devious motivations, have identified that the close connection between the UFO phenomena and plasma technologies, and are pursuing related technologies for potential military purposes. So we even have a physical document supporting the idea that foreign governments have at least considered or understand this technology and might be using it. Now, Lieutenant Ryan, the aviator, the naval aviator, he's aware of that, but he thinks they're too physical, except for the fact that they do impossible physical moves, like enormous G's. You cannot go through our atmosphere flying as fast as possible and make a left turn. You will rip your body apart. But these do. These do. The Belgian Air Force was chasing one time with two jets, two of their own pilots, and it made a left turn at Mach 4. Well, the pilots couldn't do that. They flew right by it because they had to slow down to make a left turn. All right. This is what plasma technology is like. It looks a little bit like black triangular refraction, and you know the new stealth jets use this sort of style to avoid radar. When that 60 Minutes show said they avoided radar, you have to know we know how to avoid radar. And it's by the shape of the stealth jet. So have you all seen those? Well, that's this technology. But also ball lightning is somewhat plasma technology, but nature does it. And so perhaps some nation has learned how to replicate nature. Okay, here's my buddy, Zecharia Sitchin. He's passed on, but I knew him in the latter part of his life. How many of you know Zecharia Sitchin's work or of him? Good, a lot of you. So from the 1920s to 2010, and I met him in 2004 and 2006 and all that period of time. He was a Russian Jew who studied economics at the University of London, and then he became a journalist in Israel. And while he was in Israel, he started to travel to Samaria and look at ancient ancestry and all. Well, while he was doing that, he started to discover a story in the Sumerian records. And he published this best-selling book, The 12th Planet. Basically, beyond Neptune, he believes Nibiru is a planet that circles our solar system every 3,600 years. He wrote that an advanced race of human-like extraterrestrials called the Anunaki on Nibiru, live on Nibiru, and are the missing link between Homo sapiens and evolution. Now, you know Dr. Leakey, the archaeologist, named Lucy, you remember Lucy, as possibly part of that missing link, because caveman and ape man go along and then suddenly Homo sapien appears. And where's the link? Well, there wasn't an evolution according to Cayce. The powers of nature and the sons and daughters of God decided to come here. And in the book of Job, it says, the morning stars sang together at the coming of man into the earth for the first time. And they had superpowers. And Edgar explains that they used animal husbandry sped up with their powers to breed a physical vehicle for themselves. So suddenly you have the gap. And now suddenly you get, now Edgar says Homo sapien has 4 prototypes, meaning an early one that wasn't very functional and didn't work very well. Then they tried a different one and all. And then finally, what we are called, our bodies are called the Adamic body. So that's the 4th prototype of human form. And Edgar says we are approaching the 5th prototype, and they're already here. They overlap. Some of us are still using the 4th prototype, but if they get into training, they can transform their bodies into the 5th prototype. And others are coming in with the 5th prototype. It's overlapping. When he was asked to explain the 5th prototype, he said it'll be less dense. It will have more phosphorus and radiance, like the creatures deep in the ocean radiate light. They are light sensitive, so will we be. And they will have 12 chakras, 12 spiritual centers. So some guy asked him, well, tell me about the 12. And he said, why? You're not using the 7. Now, if you read my Kabbalah book, you'll know the Kabbalists knew of 10. And the others above the 7 were above your body, in your greater body. So Edgar's simply saying, and then there are 2 more, and the new bodies will be much more capable of handling a soul while incarnate, and that soul will be able to come and go. Now, if you go to the Hopi, the Hopi Indians, they will tell you that once upon a time in ancient times, the door to heaven was open, and souls could come and go. You could manifest here, do something you liked, or get involved with or help someone you cared about, and you could leave. There was no death. Manifest and demanifest. Withdraw. Go back into the spirit. The door to heaven was open. Now it closed, and now you have to cycle through an incarnation. Mostly it's a karmic thing, but eventually we'll overcome that, and this will change. When Edgar was asked where Jesus is, he said he's in the oneness, and he can come anytime he can manifest, like he did to Mary Magdalene in the garden, and like he did in the upper room. Now, if you get a little metaphysical and metaphoric, when Jesus says to us, tarry in the upper room until you are imbued with the Holy Spirit. Now he's telling you that if you want to meet me, tarry in the upper room of your consciousness until you are filled with the spirit of enlightenment, and you will be in my presence. An angel actually spoke through Cayce and said, please stop trying to draw us down to you, but lift yourselves up to us. That's the better soul growth. Think of that a little bit. When I changed my attitude of supplicant prayer, oh, please come help me, please be with me now. I just want to see you. Remember Philip, the doubter Philip and Thomas in John 14, chapter 14? Just show us God, please. And Jesus says, Philip, have I been with you so long that you don't see and feel the Father? I and the Father are one. If you see me, you see the Father. I am one with, and that's what we're talking about. Well, the angel was trying to tell us through Cayce, learn how to lift yourselves up to our level. We'll be happy to help you, to greet you, and to enhance your abilities. But stop trying to pull us down. We come down, like my angel at South Dakota. No, it was in South Dakota, yeah. I was coming out of North. I was already in South, and Wounded Knee was the reservation. Okay, so let's see here. Dodd, do I have any more to tell you about? No. Okay, so here are his many books, and he and I talked for hours. The only reason he really contacted me was he said Edgar was the only person who had the dates that he saw in ancient records correct. He matched those dates, and Edgar gives lots of dates. In my books, you'll see me actually give you the timeline from very ancient times all the way up that Cayce gave. So that's why we became acquaintances and somewhat friends. Now, I interviewed Sitchin in New York City in 2006 and recorded it. So this is the thing I already told you. The dates were correct. That's why he really was interested in Cayce and wanted to hear more. Here's some of the sculpture pieces in Sumer or Sumeria of the Anunaki, pantheon of good and evil gods and goddesses. By the way, if you've ever read mythology, you know there are good gods and bad gods, and there are good gods who do bad things. They're very human-like, but they're super powerful. And I told Zechariah, I said, Zechariah, they were us. And he pondered on that. Oh my God. We might have been those celestial power beings, and we were just as screwed up as we are now. Do you know, Edgar said, actually the fall from grace occurred in the spirit long before the earth. And you can see that in mythology. Okay, now this Dr. Evans here, she writes a book that is about Zechariah and his teachings. And it's interesting to look at her material because she actually explains that she traveled with him for years and was very close to him. And so if you don't want to read all of his books, I would recommend you take a look at this. She really brings it out pretty well. I want to show you one thing that she doesn't use the term, but she uses the description of Elohim. And that's where I tried to get Zechariah to realize the connection with Genesis. It was clear that while humans lacked the godly characteristics of knowing and longevity, they were in all other respects created in the image, Selem, image, this is Hebrew, and likeness, dumut, of their creators. Why does she put the S there? Because Elohim is plural. Now, scholars have wrestled with this. Why is the original Genesis call the first creator plural, and because Jews are monotheistic, only one God. And the scholars realized it includes everything. There is nothing outside the whole. So it's better that we use the plural than a singular where you think it's there and you're here. It's everything. Elohim is the plural. And that's very helpful for you to think of that. In fact, Edgar Cayce once said, you can't get outside the whole. You are living the illusion that you are outside the whole and you have privacy. But then Edgar Cayce would go into trance and read everything you had thought and done for the last 2 weeks. It would freak you out. Edgar said that thoughts make an impression on the Akashic record, and I can read it. I was 18 when I read that and terrified. Somebody should have told me my thoughts are being recorded. This is not fair. I was a mess for 2 years until I read a reading that said new thoughts overshadow old thoughts, and I was saved. Thank God I can change this situation. Okay, we were the aliens was the concept I shared with him, and he kind of pondered it. I'm not saying he agreed. He pondered it. Now, I still have DVDs of my interview with him. The DVD starts out with he and I chatting, and then he gets up and does his whole lecture on the DVD. If you're interested, just go to my website and you'll see it's one of the first DVDs you can purchase there. And I think it's on sale for $12.95. It goes back to 2006. All right, now I'm going to show you, remember when I started this morning, I told you that I showed you a reading in which Edgar Cayce said this guy was a pilot in Atlantis. There's tons of evidence on the physical earth that ancient flight was normal, frequent, and carried on by many cultures. And I'm going to show it to you. I'm in the temple at Abydos in Egypt. This is a crossbeam, and there's what's on it. A helicopter. Some sort of rocket ship, a flying airplane type thing. Right there on the beam, I show you the beam. Now, if you turn the wall, you'll see a tank drawn just like a modern tank. How can this be? Now, archaeologists are freaked out by this, so they say that somebody drew over something. But it looks pretty smooth to me. I mean, you look at this, I don't see any sort of scratchiness behind these images, you know? This is what they say. They try to redraw it backwards, and I just don't see where it works. I'm sorry. I think they're straining to make it work. Another thing, in a sealed box in an ancient Egyptian tomb, sealed from ancient times, they found this wooden bird carving. The problem is it has a vertical stabilizer. Birds don't do that. They're horizontal. Where is this coming from? In China, they have a story of Luban, and Luban could fly using great kites. Now, we had an engineer from Cal State come here and show us how you could raise a multi-ton obelisk using a kite in less than a 10-mile-an-hour wind. And the kite was the wings that are carved on the ceilings of Egyptian temples. So she made the kite, put it on, and raised the obelisk up in less than a 10-mile-an-hour wind. Because we don't know of any way you could raise Hatshepsut's obelisk in Karnak Temple. It would break apart unless you had a long sleeve to keep it together. And then how would you get it up? How would you lift it? It's multi-tons, but a little less than 10 miles an hour. If it gets too much over 10 miles an hour, she says you can't control it, and it'll go all the way over. So they practice and practice, and they started lifting it up. Not only could they lift it up, it could float for a temporary period, and they could set it down on a platform. Well, here's the story of Luban. He worked in a place far away from his hometown, possibly Egypt. He missed his wife so much. You girls are going to love this guy. So he made a wooden bird. See the wooden bird I just showed you? After being redesigned several times, the wooden bird was converted into a kite that could fly long distances very quickly. Now, you know, when you get up into the upper atmosphere, the winds are tremendous. And if you could catch that wind current, you could be from here to Europe in just a few hours. Luban could go from Egypt to China very quickly in this new kite, and it could travel long distances. Oh, it says right here, using the Earth's jet stream. Okay, Luban went home on the kite to be with his wife and returned to work far away the very next day. That was a quickie, but he loved her. And she wanted the earnings, so he had to get back to work. Okay, between 770 and 475 BC, these passenger planes were apparently known, and that Luban was the guy who invented these type of unusual vehicles. I cannot explain this or truly support it, other than what I saw from the Cal State engineer showing how wind is much more usable. And remember in the, I guess it was the 10s and the 20s, the 1910s and 20s, dirigibles and blimps were common used for flight. Not speed, but they were. These are the palm leaf manuscripts. You run a little rope or string through these holes, and they become pages in a book. So this is an Indian book, ancient India book. Palm leaf, made out of dried palm leaves with a story. And the story on those leaves is unbelievable. Some Indian flying vehicles were said to be, quote, able to mount up to Surya Mandala, meaning the solar system, the planets. And still others go to Nakshatra Mandala, which is the stellar region, the galaxy. Now, these are recorded here. Now, when I try to approach scientists about this, they say, well, it's a novel. I said, so it's a novel in which they imagine things that don't exist. Well, yeah, sci-fi, like sci-fi. I said, okay. But, you know, a lot of sci-fi has come true. Well, I don't know about that. I don't want to talk about that. I'm not sure about that. One of the palm leaf manuscripts found in India is the Amsu Bodhini, which contains very detailed information about the planets. Now, when I showed this to them, they were fascinated. The scientists were fascinated. But there was no way they were going to risk their credentials of doctorate in astronomy by, you know, talking about this stuff. That was my job. You make a fool of yourself. But thanks for sharing the information. So specific that someone who actually traveled to the planets, that's the only way they could have had these details. Different kinds of light and heat for each planet on one of the palm leaves. The light there, the heat, the color, the electromagnetic field of the planet, including Mother Earth. They analyzed Earth incredibly. And it also contained information about the methods used to construct the machines capable of attracting solar rays. Now remember, Edgar Cayce said the Atlantean crystal did just this. It was used to track the sun's rays and reorient it into electricity and power, heat, and all the things that you could do with the sun's rays. Edgar added stellar rays, radiation you would call it, stellar radiation. And Andrew Collins wrote a great book explaining this called the Cygnus Mystery. See, it's rattling around back there. I just have to be patient, keep scanning, boop, pops out. In that book, he shows specific stars that their radiation is directed straight toward Earth. And this explains how Edgar could say that the Atlanteans oriented their crystals to capture that radiation and use it in certain ways. Let's see. Also contains about the machine, It also includes instructions for manufacturing machines to transport people to other planets, the moon and back. You know, we're, what's his name, the Tesla creator? Yeah. So he now has SpaceX as his company. And he's planning on building colonies, or bases, I should say, on the moon, and then shortly thereafter on Mars. And his vessels are amazing. He's taken it away from the government and the military. Recently, he did a civilian flight and took them out into space and back. And the one problem on the spaceship was the toilet. I thought that it wasn't the toilet itself, it was the fan. But he's going to repair that. But have any of you read about this? Civilian space. This is most important. If you can get beyond military motivations and governmental bureaucracy, you can really lift humanity, because the individuals, the citizens of the planet are much more full of light and life and less negatively motivated or full of limitations, which I believe others are suffering by. However, China, being a dictatorship, has no limitations of governmental decision. This is what we're doing, and we're doing it. And all the resources I direct to this. No Congress gets involved and says, yeah, but I would like to have more in my neighborhood. And before you know it, you've turned a thoroughbred into a camel. They don't have that problem. And look what they're doing. They're already out there sending back pictures from Mars. Now, they have nowhere near the financial power that SpaceX has. Nowhere near. And NASA has. I mean, NASA's budget, I believe I read somewhere it was like 12 times the whole governmental budget of China for space exploration. 12 times. So even though they're sophisticated and their dictatorship allows total focus and commitment with no variations of bureaucracy, we're way ahead of them, even though we are clumsy. But not SpaceX. You got one dictator there. And of course, he has all the top engineers working for him. If you want to see interviews with him on YouTube, he will take you for a tour through his stuff. And it's mind-boggling to think it's totally privately civilian owned. You won't believe it when you see it. Do that for yourself. Because he's probably a reincarnated Atlantean, and if Edgar gave him a reading, he'd say, you were building these things 100,000 years ago. Okay. One part I forgot to say. They could actually build materials that could not be seen by the human eye, and Edgar affirmed this. In ancient times, we knew how. Now, you could say stealth vehicles are close to that. Though the human eye can see them, radar cannot. But anyway, they knew how to use certain materials that the human eye's organic spectrum doesn't see. And so they could fly up on you and you wouldn't even know they're there. This is a Pushpaka car that flies like the whisper through the wind. It's a Vimana. They call them Vimanas. And he is out here with his brother taking a beautiful flight through the atmosphere. and playing music while he flies. Lovely Sunday afternoon. Here's another ancient India drawing. In chapter 31 of the Battlefield Commander book, now let me think now, I think this is also a palm leaf manuscript, because Ramayana or Ramayana is a different manuscript. It's like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, but it's Indian and written in Sanskrit. So I believe this is from the palm leaf manuscripts. Okay, look at the Indian Vimana or aircraft flies like a great bird with a durable and well-formed body, having mercury heated. He tells you right there how they do it. Mercury heated by fire underneath it. Now, you know, if you have an old mercury thermometer, if you heat it, the mercury will rise. I don't know, and when I've shown this to scientists, they're not sure how this would work, but they understand the principle. But they don't know how you would lift an aircraft off the ground by simply heating the mercury somehow. Okay. It had 2 resplendent wings and was propelled and is propelled by air. It flies in the atmospheric regions for great distances and carries several people. You see a couple of them here in the artwork. The inside construction resembles heaven, created by Brahma himself. Brahma is equivalent to the Christian Trinity of Father God. This is a pretty big deal. In the 11th century A.D., he wrote this Battlefield Commander, but he said that he was getting his knowledge from ancient Hindu manuscripts. So I just want you to know, I know it was 1000s A.D., but he says he was repeating ancient legends. All right, so here's more stone carvings of flying machines in India, and here's more artwork showing how they could move cattle from one field to another. And even this is considered to be Vishnu. Now, Vishnu in the Christian Trinity, Vishnu in the Hindu would be the Son of God, or the child of God. So Brahma, the Father or the Creator, Vishnu, the prodigy, the child of God, and then Shiva would be the Holy Spirit. And remember, Shiva is the destroyer of illusions. And what did Jesus say about the Holy Spirit? It will bring all things to your remembrance, open you up and clarify. All right, so we'll just go, okay, here's the big one. This is a detailed art piece with Sanskrit of one of their Vimanas. This is a double-decker, and it flew out into the solar system, according to the fictional story or novel that our scientists like to think. But that doesn't look too fictional to me. This is in the Ramayana or Ramayana, which is an epic poem like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. It's written by India, scholars in India. And do I have the name of the person? I don't know if I do here. I used to know it, but I don't have it off top. But anyway, here's where you get this vehicle in this great epic poem. Double-deck cylindrical aircraft with portals and a dome. It was said to fly at the speed of the wind and has a melodious sound as it flew. Notice there's no jet propulsion or propulsion. And remember what you saw in the 60 Minutes? The pilots said they never saw any exhaust or propulsion coming out of the vehicles. They seemed to fly in some other manner. Let's see, speed of the middle. In some ancient Indian texts, Vimanas were said to have been so numerous in design and style that it would have taken several books to describe them all. It's kind of like General Motors, Chrysler, Ford. That's how many there were. And and they all had multiple models. Okay, there are extant manuscripts that can only be described as flight manuals. This is true. I've looked at them. They found these, and in it they are actually sophisticated flying manuals for someone to learn how to fly a Vimana. And they actually have the controlling various types. So it's like a pilot who flies a Boeing 747 has to learn a 777 and stuff like that. That's what they found. And here's more of this stuff. And these drawings are unbelievable. This is a 1923 drawing of an ancient descriptive passage of how a vehicle worked. And there were various words that meant, when you translate Dhyana, it means coming down. When you translate Udada Yana, it's flying above. Sudhara, hitting the target at high speed. These are pretty creative novels. Kanda is rising suddenly. Iyanda, coming down quickly. Karpostika, flying still or hovering. Isn't it amazing that you find all of this in very ancient documents in an ancient language of Sanskrit? Now here's where it gets into our modern time. The great Alexander the Great, when his armies first attempted to conquer India, he wrote this in his journal. He wrote this. All right. Let me get to the right place. To his surprise and the surprise of his men, they were initially repelled on their attack by an aerial attack of, quote, flying fiery shields. They looked like this, and they were like shields, horizontal, which is very much like the Tully UFO in the Tully nest, a disc. Shields. Is it possible that some Indians possessed flying Vimanas as late as the date of 326 BC? However, when Alexander the Great and his army tried again, they saw no shields. They were gone, and they did invade India. Eventually, they kind of coordinated with India because they were stretched thin. But I just want you to know, now here's another one that is shocking and could be like the 1950s Cold War occurred in ancient times as well. This is a mushroom cloud, but here you're looking at an ancient record of Gurkha flying in his swift and powerful Vimana hurled against the three cities of Rishish, Anhakas, a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. We and Einstein would call that atomic or nuclear energy or bomb. This is an ancient record. An incandescent column of smoke and fire as brilliant as 10,000 suns rose in all its splendor. It was the unknown weapon, the iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes the entire race of these two peoples. So the nuclear war had occurred in ancient times. Now, if you go back into religious history, the great war between Lucifer and Archangel Michael and their legions of angels occurred in the spirit before physicality. So you see, Edgar said it all began in spirit and then manifested in the earth, and great violence and separation. He called them two major groups: the children of the law of one or oneness, and the sons of Belial. Now, we didn't know who they were until the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And Belial was written in the Dead Sea Scrolls as the Lord of the dark forces, the dark angels. This is profound that these records exist. Now, these were found in South America. They are called zoomorphs, and scientists write them off as toys. So I simply said to them, so you mean they didn't have a vehicle like this, they just made toys of a flying vehicle? And they go, I don't know. And I said, how about this that can only be seen on the plains of Peru, can only be seen from a mile in the sky? Why would they draw that? I don't know. It's weird. I said, yes, it sure is. These guys were flying around and they left you toys. Now, maybe someday we'll dig up a real one. I don't know. Some of the research done in South America shows two grooved, like car runways with two grooves of car tires or wheels. You understand? The problem is they go right off the edge of the mountain. And so it was a launching for flying. But that can't be, so don't pay attention to it. It's something odd. Here is, Edgar Cayce said, Ezekiel's wheel. Here are artists' rendering of Ezekiel's wheel, in which he says, your higher spirit lifts, if you want to lift, the angelic energies lift your vehicle. So they try to show a vehicle and being lifted. And this is when you are in touch with the essence of the manifestation of your Creator, which gave you great power in its own nature. So that is an artist rendering, two different artists rendering of what Ezekiel's flying vessels might have looked like. And remember earlier this morning I told you Cayce mentioned them as examples of Atlantean. The entity was in the Atlantean period. I think we did this, didn't Exodus, owing to all the destruction? Yeah, we did this one. Pyrenees and all. And then he says, airships of that period were such as Ezekiel described at a much later date. So you see how we connect it. Now, Edgar said Atlanteans had high tech, but ancient mystical Egyptians had low tech. They knew how to use gas lighter than air to lift ships and move heavy stones. And so here are some renderings of this idea of blimps and dirigibles and all, that Edgar actually called them gas-filled pachyderm vessels. So there was low tech as well as high tech. And he implies the Great Pyramid was built because they knew how to float stone in the air as we know how to float great ships on water. And we know how to do that by two reasons. Archimedes' principle of dispersion. So if you make the hull right, you disperse the water, you'll sit. But also airtight compartments. If you make the compartments airtight, like my dad in the Navy one time went across the North Atlantic in a convoy of multiple ships. And the storm was so great, it drove the ships underwater for long periods. And they'd pop up because they had airtight compartments. You see? The aircraft carrier that was with them, its front deck was curled back just like this from the power of the North Atlantic Sea. That's a huge metal flight deck, was totally destroyed. When they finally got to Spain, half the crew was sick and the ships were nearly destroyed. He was on a heavy cruiser and he said you could look out the portal and see these light cruisers go underwater and they wouldn't bob up for another 15 minutes, and he knew that crew was throwing up all over the place. But a heavy cruiser could sit on top and they got rocked terribly. But they didn't go under that long, those light vessels. But all of them made it to Spain. They didn't lose any vessels. The hide of many, is this Edgar? Yeah, this is his Atlantean series. 364 is the Atlantis series of readings. The hide of many of the pachyderm or elephants many in the containers for the gas that were used as both lifting and for the impelling of the crafts above various portions of the continent, and even abroad. These, as may be seen, took on those abilities not only to pass through that called air, or that heavier, but through that of water. Now that's curious, and I can't explain it. I don't know how a pachyderm skin full of lighter than air could go through water. I don't have, but anyway, I'm just quoting from the reading. Now, here's more of what Atlantean technology, and Edgar called them electrical impelling vessels. Now, this would have been more of Atlantean. Apparently, in the central crystal of this region of Atlantis, there were several crystals, this vessel would be getting radiation energetics from the sun through the crystal to its vessel to generate electricity that would propel the vessel through the air. All of this is surprising that we don't recognize that long ago we had flying abilities. So let me see in this big one, how are we doing time-wise? We're okay? Okay. So Edgar says that we actually lost the art of tempered brass, the temperament that wood as becomes between aluminum, as we now call it, and that of uranium, with those of the fluxes that are from those of the combined elements of the iron that is carbonized with those of the other fluxes. See? And everybody goes, these made for lightness of the structure, non-conductor or conductors of electrical forces. So I would assume that some of them didn't use electricity and some of them did. That were used for the impelling of same rather than the gases. So these were the electrical impelling devices of the Atlanteans, which were used as the lifting. See? For that as in the nature's forces may be turned into even the forces of that makes life, as given from the sun's rays to those elements that make for or find corresponding reaction in their application of same, or the reflection of same, to the rays itself, or a different or changed form of storage of force, as called electrical in the present. Now, there was an engineer, Mr. 440, and he studied all of this and wrote some reports about it. He seemed to comprehend what Edgar was talking about, and we could be getting back to that. But this would explain why the lieutenant could see no exhaust coming out of these alien vessels. Okay, now, believe it or not, in Chaldean ancient records and in Babylonian records, they talk about flight, and we just ignore it. Really, you cannot explain it, so you don't mention it to your professor or you won't get your PhD. That's honest to God truth. Okay, in the ancient Chaldean work, the Sifra-La, there are over 100 pages of technical details on building a flying machine. It contains words that are best translated in English as graphite rod, copper coils, crystal indicator. You know, watch, crystal watch? Yeah, and even your cell phone used to have crystals in it. I don't know if the newest ones do. I think they do, but I'm not sure. Vibrating spheres, stable angles, and the like. Now, in Babylon, that's Chaldean. In Babylon, the Hakatha, which means the laws of the Babylonians, states, quote, now this is one of the laws of the government, the privilege of getting your flying license of operating a flying vehicle is great. Just like me getting my driver's license at 16. The knowledge of flight is among the most ancient of our heritages. A gift from those from on high. Guess who pointed this out to me? Zechariah Sitchin. See, those were the ones. Those people from on high, Nibiru, the Anunaki. We received it from them as a means of saving many lives. Who were these beings from on high? Aliens? Possibly. Or sons and daughters of God? Possibly. Okay, here's some pictures. This is an altar from Babylon, Persia. Persia is further east of Babylon. And there you see the flying of the spirit energy with a device in his hand that appears to control direction. This is assumptions, I agree. And here's the idea that ancient people actually helped the primitive earth people become more sophisticated, and they built some of these temples. And Edgar explains his view as involution into matter preceding the evolution up through matter. Do you understand what I'm saying? That actually cosmic celestial beings of great universal knowledge and power were attracted to this planet, and when they came here, they were like the mythological gods. They had great ability, and they could manipulate matter. And as they descended deeper and deeper, Edgar says, they became trapped in matter, and it possessed them. And the deeper they got into it, the more physical they became. But they still had their wisdom during that descent until they became totally physical. And then Genesis chapter 6 says, I regretted having created them. God actually says that. It hurt my heart to see how corrupt they were. I regretted having created them. I'm going to cleanse the earth and start over. So you actually have it in the Bible, the end of this powerful period to the beginning of our more mundane period that we are living through. But all of this is going to come back. And if you look at the man Edgar Cayce, he's a prototype of what you and I are going to be like. Do you know Edgar, in the normal conscious state, not in trance, already knew your aura colors, and as you talked to him, he could see them changing and know if you were starting to exaggerate. Oh, Edgar, the fish was this big. And he would see the colors in your aura shift, and he would know, not quite, you know? Or another thing that he noticed was if a woman was becoming enchanted with him. He was about 6 feet tall, very handsome, blonde hair, tall, and he would see their aura change in a color of enchantment, and he could tell, now's the time to cut this short or make a big mistake. Gladys told me that if you, she's his stenographer and assistant in many ways. She said, John, if you came near him, he knew what you had been doing and what you had been thinking. So some Monday mornings, I would go around the back way to my office because it was none of his business. This is a prototype. And so you ask yourself, well, what would that be like? The first thing that made Edgar Cayce really great was he had no judgment of people. He could see the dark side and not condemn them, not push them away from possibility, from potential. They all had the potential to turn. He said, in the midst of the most vile human act, the slightest shift in the heart or mind can transform that, and you will learn a great lesson and never do it again. You see, so in order for you to be as psychic as he, you must develop compassion, understanding, patience, and know human nature is just one of the characteristics of an entity, of the whole entity, because they have, before God's presence, their angel stands there and was made in that image. And like Jesus said, in the least among you, and in my family we had a lot of least among us, give them a cup of water, show them mercy, help them, visit them if they're in prison. And we had some of my family go to prison for various reasons, and we sure as my mother made sure of that. She was a very magical woman. She just passed at 97, and Dad's still kicking, and it drives me crazy. He's really into politics and sports, so he's always, hey, how about them Cowboys? And I go, oh, God, I'm tired of hearing about the Cowboys. Dad, you live close to the Washington Redskins. Well, they're not called Redskins. The Washington team. You should be rooting for them. No, America's team's the Cowboys. This is a 102-year-old guy with passion flowing through him. So my mother's mystical nature would say to us, do you know that Uncle so-and-so went to college, and he's going to be in college for 2 years? My brothers and I would go, I thought he was like 60 years old. Yeah, and then Dad would say, she actually means prison. But she's using the word college to soften the blow. Go with her to the college. And she would take us up to Petersburg, Virginia, and there was a massive prison with razor wire all around it. But across the street was the minor crime prison, which had no walls, nothing. They just said, if you leave here before your time's up, that's where you go. And nobody ever walked off the grounds. And Uncle so-and-so had 2 years of prison there by the federal government. So we went in and sat down and visited every month. Mom wanted to go visit him. You're not going to leave him up there. You're not going to do it. He's family. Okay, Mom, okay. And we would trek up there for this mistake that one of the uncles made. So, if you develop like Edgar, you have to develop a heart and a love like Jesus. Even, I told you the other day, truth and love must be balanced. And I showed you how he treated Peter, whom he loved very much. And he knew Peter was going to deny him. He knew Peter was scared of being arrested like he was going to be. He understood that. But even after the resurrection, he still met with Peter, loved Peter, and helped guide Peter. Edgar was kind of that way. And you have, if you're going to be fully psychic and see everything about me, you're going to have compassion and understanding. And if I see everything about you, you're going to want me to have compassion and understanding. That's just the way you develop. So that was the great thing that allowed Edgar to be super psychic and even affect things. I'll give you one example, and if you've ever read his biography, There Is a River, he tells the story in there. A guy in his hometown in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, hated him, felt he was a disgrace, and it was terrible. And Edgar said, that doesn't matter. In fact, I'll show you. I can draw him here to my office right now. And everybody said, he'll never come to your office. And Edgar just got quiet like this. And in a few hours, there was a knock on the door. He walked in. He was stunned to be in his office. And he looked around and said, I don't know what I'm doing here. And he left. And Edgar looked at his group and said, and he explained, we feel like we're separate consciousnesses, but there's a collective consciousness among us, and we are connected. And my thoughts can actually affect you, and your thoughts affect me. The collective is affected by the individual minds and thoughts of people. So Edgar explains that when the light age comes, it's because more thoughts of light and love and patience and kindness are rising into the collective, and it overwhelms the dark, negative, selfish minds, and soon they have no place. They can't maintain their presence in the higher consciousness, and they leave the earth situation for as 1,000 years. Satan is banished or bound from this world. So keep that in mind as you grow in your spiritual power. And Edgar explains, the more you grow and the more powerful you become, the more vulnerable you are to the whisper of the dark side. And I have lived that. I know that's true. As a human being, when you use all the methods, Edgar said, using the same methods, you can create a Frankenstein or a godling. It all depends on the motivation, the intention that you were using to build this. And he said, as you get stronger and more powerful, more illuminated, more psychic, notice that your mind can actually affect time and space and stuff like this. You'll hear the whisper, you know, I really am an awesome human. Very few like me. Ooh, what's the old saying? Pride goeth before a fall. That whisper will kill you. That's why Edgar, when he was asked, how will you know what you're doing is right? He said, when it makes you more humble, more meek, more patient. That's when you know you're smoking hot. The whisper can come and you can laugh and say, oh, I've heard that before. Not going there. Been down that road. Not doing that again. That's wisdom. So mistakes that you have made in your life and you've come away from them and said, oh man, I'm sorry about that. I don't want that. You have grown. You have had wisdom. That's a profound step forward. The trouble is we tend to look at it over and over and over and get into this loop thinking about how bad I was or what I said was so wrong and all, when actually you should say, man, whew, not doing that again. Now you've got the wisdom. Now I guarantee you, as soon as you say that, it will cycle back to tempt you again. And just to see if you really got it. And sometimes as I aged, I would look at the temptation as it came to me again, or something coming out of me to say, and I would say, oh, I know you bugger. Shut up. We're not doing this. We're not saying this. I don't care if we're right and she's wrong. She has a right to manifest her feelings, and I'm going to listen, period. Shut up. And man, I'm telling you, it improved a lot of my relationships. It improved a lot because I had that. Well, that's what Edgar had, and he's the prototype. So as we grow, keep all of these things in mind. Okay, so I left some time for questions or sharing, and they have microphones, and they're going to come around because they want to record your questions, so when you purchase the recording, you actually hear them and have them on your recording. No hands, you've got it, you're hungry for lunch. Do you know what A.R.E stands for? Always ready to eat. Okay.
In our discussion of aliens, I can't help but recognize another pioneer in the ancient alien scenario, and that was a gentleman by the name of A.R.E. Van Daniken.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, I don't believe everything, but A.R.E.,
Right.
one of the impressions he laid on me is whenever you see the word God or angel, be very skeptical. I find this especially true in an angry God that we find in the Old Testament, and the God who wants to wipe out a civilization because he made a mistake.
Yeah.
So are we looking at God, the universal God, or are we looking at perhaps an ancient alien type of God, or a God of extraterrestrial origin who has human characteristics?
Yep.
And perhaps that might be one way of looking at it. I don't know how you feel about it, but I just wondered what your thoughts were.
I agree with you. And A.R.E. Van Daniken has lectured here a few times. He's way up in age, but he's still a good lecturer. Now, here's a point I would recommend to you people who are serious students of this or have a longing for the Bible. Get a lexicon. In the lexicon, you want Hebrew, Chaldean, and Greek. And now some of the Bibles come with a lexicon in the back. And what the lexicon does is tell you what the original word was that is now being translated into English, what it was and what it meant. So, the name of God in the Bible is changing all the time. If you read the Bible with your lexicon, Elohim, Yahweh Elohim, just Yahweh. And then you take the journey through the dark god forces that kill and massacre groups of people that are considered evil, blah, blah, blah. And then you come to this strange guy, this young Jewish boy, who calls him Abba, Father. I mean, that upset the Pharisees so much. Nobody is that close to God that he's your papa. There's no way. And yet, but if you have a lexicon, you can read all of these and get what they meant originally in their original language, if you're into that sort of stuff. And the Bible I have, one of them, the lexicon runs right down between the two paragraphs of verses, so I can quickly look over. Sometimes it just gives me the number in the lexicon, and I have to go to the lexicon and say, oh, Elohim is plural. And it's a mystery to scholars, and this is what they think it might have been, why it might have been plural, you know. So I agree with you. You have to be real careful at the level of God you're talking about, and then Jesus takes it to a level that's mind-boggling.
Eric shook up quite a few people with this book, Chariots of the Gods.
Chariots of the Gods. If you haven't read it, you might enjoy that. He really shows a lot more than I showed of ancient alien artifacts. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, one more. Oh, one back there. Okay, you go ahead. You've got the mic.
Okay.
You go ahead.
Have there been any children that remember their previous lives that never lost that memory, that they carry it to adulthood?
Yes. Now, at the University of Virginia, Ian Stevenson, Dr. Ian Stevenson, and I wrote all about him, but he also wrote several books. You can go on Amazon, and one of the books is called 24 Cases of Reincarnation, and the other one is Reincarnation and Biology, where your body carries scars or memory marks from previous lives. And he did tremendous research. He found, however, that when he talked to young children who had vivid past life memory, by the time they got close to puberty, they didn't even remember telling him. That's how densely they were coming into this world. But when they were still young, they told him all the story of their past life, and he recorded all of that. But when he came back to visit them, they didn't even remember him telling him these stories. It's wonderful to read. He's a scientist. He's actually a psychiatrist. He's passed on, I'm sorry. He was a psychiatrist who wrote wonderful research books in a scientific manner. And I think on YouTube you'll see my video showing elements of his book distilled into a presentation, especially the biology of reincarnation. And Edgar affirmed that you carry scars and birthmarks from past lives, and you know what they mean. Your subconscious knows how they came about. Okay, yes, in the back.
I have a granddaughter like that. From the
granddaughter?
time she was 3 years old, she told us that her parents were not her parents, and that her parents came from another time and that they had died. So I still live with that. I journal it every time she mentions another event in her past life. But that's neither here or there right now. You talked about the woman who lived the obelisk, Maureen Clemens, who was a speaker at our conference many times, quite a few times. And it's an exciting thing to watch her. She's a woman who came to forth. I think you remember her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she also validated the fact that the pyramids, and she used a concrete stone because she could not use the sandstone.
Right.
And she also conquered the fact of the knots of the Egyptians on their boats. She reproduced those. The only thing she could not reproduce in that experiment was the cloth that the Egyptians used, because there is no valid technique as to how they use the cloth for kites.
This is the kite flying
sorry.
obelisk lifting engineer.
Yes. Her
Maureen Clemens.
Yes.
I'm sure we have recordings of her
Yes.
presentations here.
She's done documentaries on the History Channel.
Probably
and
on
that,
YouTube also,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
too. She's phenomenal. I admire her. When she came here and presented, I was excited that a woman came forth.
Amen,
with that knowledge.
sister. The goddess is rising up.
That's right.
Get ready, boys.
That's right. That's what the question I wanted to bring
Yes.
forth. Because you remembered all the men, but you didn't remember
I'm sorry.
her.
I should have. Let me share with you, when I was a young boy, I had a recurring nightmare of being born to my parents. And it happened over and over and over, and it basically was this. I was a little boy, I'd fall asleep and I'd have a dream that I was out in space looking at a blue and white planet that looked very pretty, when suddenly, like Star Trek, a tractor beam caught a hold of me and started sucking me toward that planet. And I was fighting not to go and yelling, and I didn't want to go, went right through the clouds. Suddenly I came right into Earth and into an old 1930s gymnasium with bars on the window in New Jersey. Now, I was born in Atlantic City, but this was more like Newark. And I went screaming, no! And I went right through the bars into this dank old gymnasium, and there were my parents sitting at a flimsy card table with no eyes. And I went, no! And suddenly someone would shake me and grab my arm, and I would open my eyes. It'd be my mom, and she'd say, honey, you're just having a nightmare. And I go, no! For the first years of my life, as the oldest child, I was very uncomfortable with my parents. I had a hard time. Eventually, we healed a lot of this, and as we grew, I began to play bridge and golf with them and come to really admire them and understand them and appreciate them. But I never wanted to be born to them. But it was my karma, and my soul wanted to do it and get it over with. So I resolved a lot, you know. So I just share that with you. Childhood things are very vivid, and when my children would tell stories, Doris and I used to sit with them as they were falling asleep, because Edgar said that's the best time to relate with a child, is as they're falling off, they're getting into reverie, and they're getting closer. And he said if you would give them positive pre-sleep suggestions of uplifting nature, it would help. For example, a mother came to Edgar Cayce and said, my boy is 9 years old and he has wet the bed for the whole 9 years that I've had him. What can I do? And Edgar, in trance, said, he was one of the judges in Salem who dunked the witches, and he accused you of being a witch and dunked you. And he deeply regrets this. And he sits in his own water now every night, he said. And Edgar said, but he is now in your flesh and blood. And if you whispered forgiveness to him at night as he's falling asleep, he would stop. That very night, she gave that baby boy, 9-year-old boy, the pre-sleep suggestion, and Edgar wrote it for her. You are a good person. You are going to make a lot of people happy this lifetime. You are a good person. Just say it over and over. The next morning, the bed was dry, and he never peed again. But do you see what he needed? Forgiveness from her. He was carrying tremendous guilt. But remember, his body was made from her body. And so her vibes, her vocal cords, the essence of her also affected his body. Tremendous story of childhood and past life memory. Okay, did we have another question? Okay, we have one over here. And then we'll break for lunch. I know you're starving.
We have one online question, John.
Online.
Online. And this question is, what do you feel is what are the most beneficial actions we can take to help develop our spiritual gifts during this time of the big shift? And how would you describe those gifts?
It's very simple from Edgar Cayce. Simply budget some time from your 24 hours a day to retreat from physical outer life. Sit quietly, go into reverie or reflection. If you know how to meditate, go into a prayerful beginning and lead into a meditative state and sit in that silence with expectation, with expectancy, receptivity. I have pulled back from outer life for just 15, 20 minutes, maybe longer, and I'm receptive to any inner guidance from myself, my soul self, or from my guardian angel, or from any heavenly force, or the Creator himself, whatever. Here am I budgeted this time to sit in receptivity. And shield yourself from any of your own dark urges or dark thoughts, because they'll come up and they'll possess you too much. Remember, Carl Jung said, shine a light in every corner of your consciousness so you know yourself. You know yourself, even your dark side. And then you're a master over it because you're aware of it. The first step to control is acknowledgement of the situation, of the motivation, of your weakness. So that's the key. Budget some time to remove from the outer life and go and connect with the inner sources and be expectant and receptive while surrounding yourself with the highest ideal to protect yourself from even your own dark side being too dominant. Because there are some parts of us that we cannot heal without the Holy Spirit or the Spirit of God or our guardian angel's help. It's just too big. And if it comes to the surface, in fact, Edgar said, never kick the door of the subconscious open until the soul's ready to bring that issue up. Then you are prepared to face it. Don't bust through with, say, hypnosis or drugs or whatever, the techniques that have been used. Acid, remember back in my era, people were dropping acid and having tremendous, expansive mind perception, but it haunted them for a long time. And several of my friends who dropped acid told me when they tried to start to learn to meditate, it took them much longer to go that way because they had done the other way. And so retreat from life for a period of time, be expectant and receptive, and you'll grow rapidly. And then intuition comes in subtle ways. It's rarely a loud voice. It's rarely a profound sensory bombardment. It's subtle. And so you have to learn to be a little more quiet in yourself and stop the habitual thinking and patterns. So when you approach a person, don't approach with all your prejudgments. Approach and kind of be open and listening and feel them as you listen, because between their words is the truth. And you'll become much more intuitive faster, and you'll save yourself a lot of bad relationships if you start to do that, and your relationships will improve. And of course, dreams is nature's way of making you retreat. You fall asleep. Now you're in the subconscious, and if you learn to work with your dreams, it's really going to help you. For example, an individual in this life, early in my life, who was very cruel to me and broke my heart, and I was so furious and angry, I wanted to have nothing to do with her. I had a dream that she was going to call me tomorrow. Here's what the dream was like. I was at my office, the phone rang, I picked it up, hello, there was her voice, and I slammed the phone down. Phone rang again. I picked it up. There was her voice. I slammed it down. This repeated. And then suddenly it rang. I picked it up, and there was her voice, and I didn't slam. In the dream now, I didn't slam the phone down, and I listened. And what I heard healed the whole thing. The next day, what do you think happened? That nasty little bugger called me. Do you think I slammed the phone down? No, the dream had warned me. Now, who's dreaming? Me, my subconscious. And it's timeless. It's aware she's motivated to heal this. She knows she hurt you. And now she wants to, well, let's get this karma over with now. I don't want to reincarnate and have to meet her again. Do you see? And sure enough, I didn't say much. I said, hello. I heard her voice, and I just sat there. And I didn't do any grandiose thing or anything. I said, thank you. You know, I really wasn't as ready as she was. Do you see? But I allowed and acknowledged it, and eventually I was light. You know, that heaviness is here on your chest. And eventually, after that phone call, I had no weight on my chest in relation to her, and I could have seen her physically. She lived in a different city where I went to university, but now I was here. So I'm just sharing that with you. Those are key things to help you. Retreat for a while into reflection and watch your dreams. All right. What do you say we eat? All right. See you.
Thank you. We'll see you all back here at 2 o'clock for Hugh Newman. Thank you, John.
Okay.